In Ableton Live, you've got two views, either the session view and the arrangement view. And you use the tab key to switch back and forth between them. So there's a couple of ways that I can switch back and forth between my two views. One, I can use these little buttons over here on the right-hand side. Up here, there's my two views. It's a little bit, hold on, let me move this over like that. There we go. So here, you've got these two buttons up here in the upper right-hand corner. These will allow you to switch your windows. You can also go up here to View, and you can switch your windows right here between the, where is it? Oh, well, it used to be over here. I guess it's like second window. They call it full screen and second window now. I don't know. But I never use that. What I use the tab key. And it's super easy. Just the tab key just flips back and forth between your two views like this. Here's your session view, and here's your arrangement view. Now, the arrangement view is going to look very familiar to you already if you've used Pro Tools or Logic or even maybe FL Studio. And this is just where you can lay out your song in a timeline. You've got the time that goes across the top up here. It's measured in bars and beats up across the top. Down at the bottom, you've got your minutes and seconds down here so you can see how long the song is. And this is just time, goes from left to right. So it starts over here and it ends up over here. This view over here, when you look at it for the first time, it looks like a mix window. It looks like a mix window with a spreadsheet is how I always kind of thought about these when I first was using Ableton Live and I was trying to wrap my head around it. To me, it looked like a spreadsheet and a mix window. Kind of a weird thing for music production software, right? So down here, we've got our mix section here, and I can adjust this. If I zoom in, here you can see, if I mouse over this part right here, you can see how my cursor changes. So if you're looking at this and you're like, oh, those mixers aren't, the meters aren't very high. Well, I can grab these and pull them up like this. I can make them a lot more like that. And this little thing right here is how we can actually mix it up and down like that. So I can put that right there, and that's your levels. So you can adjust your levels, how loud you want it to be. Okay, so that's just the quick, overview mixing right there. You got pan. The pan is not a knob; it's actually like a little box. Oh, well, here's the pan knob down here, and then you've got if you got your sends right here, and every time you make a new return track, you've got your sends here. It adds another send on. So if I make another return track, you can see I get another send down here. And that's a big difference between this. Is one of the big differences is that Ableton Live does not have aux channels. Okay, so Ableton Live really only has two main types of tracks and then another kind of sub track, and that's the two tracks are MIDI tracks, audio tracks, and then there's also your return tracks over here. There's not instrument tracks. There's not aux tracks. There's a master fader over here, but you can't make another one. So it's like right off the bat, there's like less stuff, but the things that you can do with these are a little bit more. Like I can use my audio tracks as aux tracks, and I can use my MIDI tracks as instrument tracks. So they kind of double up stuff there. Okay, so the session view here is the mix window, loop player. It plays the loops. It plays your samples. We'll talk about that in a second. And the arrangement view is a traditional edit window. So over here we've got this. Here's the screen, and everything's like numbered here. And these numbers correspond. If you've got the notes, the numbers correspond over here to this window right over here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use my Ableton Live here, and we're going to go around in a circle and talk about what all these things do on the screen so we can just get a quick overview of everything that's going on here. And if you want to look at this later on, you can go through and you can look at this in the notes here where you've got all this stuff here, and you can see, you can correspond it to the numbers on the screen over here. Okay, so that's how this is laid out. So, and some of these things are really useful, some of them are not so useful. So let's just go ahead and get started with this. The first, up here in the upper left-hand corner, we've got this thing called the link button. And the link button allows you to connect over Wi-Fi different Ableton Live programs or different other programs. This is like a solution to a problem of we want two computers to work together and play at the same time. And it used to be this really crazy way to do it. You had to use Ethernet cables and you had to like connect them up and then run them through like IAC and all this stuff. And it was really buggy and it didn't work that well. And the best solution for that was just not to do it. So Ableton, a few years ago, they made this thing called the link. And what this does is when you turn this on, if there's another Ableton Live link software, which can be Ableton Live or it can be other programs as well, like especially for iPad and iPhone, there's like a lot of little like kind of music production software that uses link. And so what that does is it locks their tempo and start and stop in together. So if I push play on one, it's going to play the other thing. And it works really, really well. So if you're using like IMPC, for example, if you're making beats or you're using iMachine and you're making beats on your phone with your headphones on the train or something like that, and you're like, I made this dope beat, I want to play it along with Ableton Live. Well, you can actually turn the link on, make sure they're on the same Wi-Fi system, and when you hit play, it'll actually play both of them. It's like magic. It's super, super cool. And it plays them in time together. So it's a really cool thing. It's not something that you need a lot. If you're not using it, then you don't need it like at all. And actually in the preferences, if you go into the preferences, you can actually turn, see it says here, it says show link toggle. And it says show it or hide it. If I hide it, you can see it's gone from up here. So if you're not using it, you can just turn it off and not use it. But if you do use it, or you think you're going to use it or whatever, just leave it on. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't really take up space. There's nothing else over here to take up space. So I would just leave that on just so you remember that it's there. Cool. All right. Next is we have the metronome and we've got the tap tempo here. The metronome is where you set your tempo. It's your BPM. So if I turn on my, here, let me turn this down a little bit. Oops. Turn this down. There we go. If I turn on my metronome, this is your on off for the metronome right here. If I click that and I turn it on, we can hear the metronome is going. You can change the sound of the metronome by going over here to sound. There's the classic sound. There's our MPC sound. And here's the wood sound, which is my preference. And I can change my tempo right here. So I can slow it down. I can just click and drag on this. So I can slow that down. That's 87 BPMs. I can click on it and type in a number and hit return. And it speeds up again. I can slow it down again. Okay, so this tempo just moves fluidly. Now, if I'm not sure about what the tempo is that I want, but I have a beat in my head, and I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can tap it in, and once I tap it in, once I hit 4 times, it'll put the tempo in correctly, whatever was in my head, and I can just like clean it up a little bit, like from there. Okay, so that's your tempo. And that's what the tap does. The tap, you're actually tapping on it with your mouse. And then over here is these things called nudge. The nudge is like something that Ableton made years and years ago to use Ableton Live with like DJing. And it was something that never really caught on that much. Like people didn't really use it that much. And they kind of like abandoned it, I guess. I don't know. Like nobody talks about it. It's not something that people really use that much. I've never seen, even when it was like new, I never really saw people use it because it was really like about like if you're gonna use like a CDJ or a record on stage and you want to match it up with Ableton Live, you could do that with this. It kind of nudges it like you would nudge like a DJ. But it's yeah, it never really caught on that much. I never really saw people use it because it was very specific. And at the time when they made it, people were still trying to figure out how they were going to use Ableton Live. It was mostly for performance stuff, and people were going to figure out how they use it. And it's one of those things, it's like, if you use it, you probably use it a lot. And if you don't use it, you never use it, like ever. This is something, I wish they could hide these, because they're just there. And I don't know why they don't just put a hide toggle on there. But there they are. You can ignore them. So here's your time signature. And so if we want to make a song in like 3/4 or 6/8 or something like that, you can do that. For the most part, you're probably not really going to use that much unless you're making like prog rock or doing something. And you can also change your time signature throughout the song if you want to, as the song kind of plays along. Over here is the global quantize. The global quantize is very important, but we are going to come back to this and talk about it when we're talking about the clips. So just keep in mind the global quantize is over here. My advice with global quantize is keep it set to 1 bar. Don't change it. That just comes from a lot of my experience of just trying out different things, but it's up to you, and different situations may call for different global quantize settings. So we're going to talk about it, but just know that the default setting, which is 1 bar, is probably the best. Over here is follow. So for example, if I have this turned on and I zoom way in to my thing and I click over here and I play, see, it's the timeline is like following. The timeline, it'll follow my cursor. It just keeps my cursor right in the middle there. If you turn it off, it doesn't do that. It just moves across your screen. I usually keep mine off. Some people like to keep it on. I don't like it when everything's moving around on me, because I'm usually like listening while I'm focused on one thing while I'm working. I'm like editing something while I'm listening to the whole loop because I want to hear my changes in real time. So I usually keep it off, but there it is. You can turn that on. Over here is your kind of like playhead location. So if I move this here, you can see wherever I click on my screen, it's going to put it in a different location here. So you can see that number changes. And also if I click and drag it, you can see that the little triangle thing here is moving around, and that's where I'm going to start playing from. And that's also where it currently is located. So I can go here, hit play, and there we go. You can see it's moving, and you can see this is counting right here. Okay. So over here is your transport, play, stop, record. The record button here is for the arrangement view only. This record button actually does not do anything in this view over here. We're going to use individual record buttons for this view over here. In here is my MIDI overdub for my arrange window in here. So also, let me just show you one thing. Down here in the lower left hand corner, you'll probably notice there's like a little info view box down here that kind of moves. It changes as you move around. If you are familiar with Logic and you've been using Logic, Logic has the same feature. They actually added it in because Ableton Live had it, and it's something that Ableton Live has had since the very, very beginning. And basically, it's like the manual in your screen right here. So if you want to know what something does, you can just mouse over it, and you can see what it does. And you can just look down there in the lower left-hand corner. I usually keep mine closed because I know pretty much what everything does. Like, I should. I mean, I've been using this thing for 20 years. When I'm teaching, I'll open it up sometimes just so you can see stuff, but most of the time I do keep it closed, and the reason why is because this area down here is very important, and I don't want to take up extra space with this little info view. Most people I know that use Ableton Live on the regular do not have this open. But it is useful for stuff. So for example, if I forget like what one of these buttons does that I just never use it, I can mouse over and I can see what it does. And you can see if I mouse over this plus sign right here down in the lower left hand corner, it says this is the MIDI arrangement overdub. So when it's enabled, existing notes and MIDI clips in the arrangement view will be mixed with rather than replaced by newly recorded notes. And I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But basically, this is your MIDI overdub. If you're making like a drum beat or something and you want to like have it loop and then have the MIDI notes come in on the clip that's already there, you can push this button and it will do that. Speaking of looping, the loop function is right over here. I'm just going to skip ahead to over here. The loop function is right here. You can click that and see what happens when I click it. This little box turns on with these little flags on either side. If I turn it off, you can see the box is no longer highlighted. I can select it and it looks like it's like on, but the loop is not on. I have to turn this on like this. And now you can see these lines are always there on the sides. So this is my loop. So if I hit play on this, let me change this down to 2 bars. If I hit play on this, it's going to loop back to the beginning right here. And so if you're making music in like Pro Tools or Logic, you're probably really used to looping stuff. You're going to be looping stuff all day, all night. But like I said before, in Ableton Live, things work a little bit differently. So you may or may not use that loop functionality as much in Ableton Live as you do in like Pro Tools or Logic. I use it all the time, and I'm going to show you how I use Ableton Live, because I've been using it for such a long time that the way I work is just kind of like smooth back and forth between the two views, and I do some stuff and I'll set it up and I'll go to the other view like that. I do use this a lot, but the way this is working here is this one here, this number here shows me where the start point of my loop is, and this one here shows me how long the loop is for. So it starts at bar 9 and it's a 2-bar loop. Now, in order for this button here, this MIDI overdub button to work, we have to have the loop turned on, or at least it works better with the loop turned on. It's kind of, you could use it without the loop turned on, but that's, I don't know, I wouldn't do it like that. So this button here really wants to go along with this button right here, just so you know. All right, here is our automation arm button. This is like, if you have this turned on, basically you're going to record automation. Automation in Pro Tools and Logic work very different. It's almost like the opposite of how it works in Ableton Live. They still control things to change them over time, but with Logic and Pro Tools, the automation is king. So if you automate something, you can't go back and change it without actually going into the automation lane and changing the automation lane. With Ableton Live, it's not like that. With Ableton Live, if I have automation and then I move my fader or I move a knob or whatever it is, it's going to stop following the automation and it's going to adjust to my new setting. So, and again, I'm going to show you all this stuff a little bit, but the reason why it does this and the reason why they have this set up is because Ableton Live is really designed to be live. The name is very straightforward, live. It was designed from the ground up to be used on a stage with a computer and do stuff in real time. So the way they kind of figured it out is that the automation even works like that. So if you are on a stage and you've got some song playing and it has like a volume fade or something like that, and you're like, I don't want to do that, I want to keep it going, then you can just move the volume fader on that for that track, and it'll stop following the automation. So it's pretty cool. It takes some getting used to. This button here is if you did make one of those changes, if you did change the automation, it stops following the automation on the track. If you change something, then this one goes back to the written automation. I'll show you that in a second. This is your MIDI capture button. So if you're playing some stuff and you're like, wow, that was really cool, but I wasn't recording, you can hit this button and it will save what you just played. And this here is your session, session view overdub. So the session record button, session view overdub. So this button here is for recording into tracks in this view here. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. We're going to get into recording and stuff today too. We talked about all this stuff over here. This is punch in, punch out. I don't really use those that much, but you can set those up and use them if you like. Over here, I'm just going to go quick across this stuff. This is the draw mode. You're going to see me using this a lot during the next couple weeks. This is your keyboard mode, so you can use your computer keyboard as a musical keyboard. These buttons here, this one and this one, when I click on them, you'll see that everything turns orange. A lot of stuff on the screen turns orange. And this one here, a lot of stuff on the screen turns blue. Well, what this is for is so I can assign keys to do stuff on my screen. And you can see that my default setting actually has a few shortcuts set up, where the L key, I have it set up to turn my loop on and off. And I've got it, you can see it over here. I got the slash key, locks my envelopes. The L key is my transport loop on and off. And the M key turns my metronome on and off. So for example, if I hit, where is it? There we go, M. Oh, I gotta turn U. Oh, they have that. Okay, I have to change that. I forgot the Ableton Live 10 or 11 changed up some stuff. Hold on a second. Change it to C. C for click. There we go. So if I'm playing and I just hit the C key on my computer, I've just set up a shortcut for that. And that's what this kind of keyboard mode is for. It can map any kind of key on my computer to control different things on here. So you can see if I hit the L key, it turns the loop. They changed it. Oh, yeah. It turns this loop on and off here. And then if I go over to here, I hit the slash key, it'll turn my envelope lock on and off right here. So I've just got a couple things set up, but obviously you can see that, yeah, they changed the settings so actually it overrides. It didn't used to do that with Live 10. So interesting. I hadn't noticed that yet. I'm surprised I didn't notice it yet. All right, so that's the key button here. That's pretty cool. Anything that turns orange, you can map. It's really neat, actually. This one here is your key MIDI mapping. So on your controller, you know, your controller has faders and knobs and stuff like that. And with these controller, you can actually set those up so they can control anything on the screen. Now, a lot of controllers actually have like an Ableton Live default mode. So just it'll automatically control things in Ableton Live, which I'm going to show you about that later. But you can also set up your own things, and it's super, super easy. If I want to have a knob control like a filter here, let me go ahead and let's put a filter in here. So if I have a filter down here, wait, where is it? Right here. See how it's got this like blue hand on it? Well, I can use the knobs on my keyboard to automatically just control things on here. Just automatically sets up to work. It's a really, really cool feature that Live developed a long time ago that makes it very easy to use controllers just straight out of the box without even having to map anything. But if I wanted to, what I could do is I can go down here, I can hit Command M, and I can map it so it's on one of these knobs specifically. So I just click on it and I turn the knob and it's mapped to it. Now I can turn the knob and it just works right there. You can see how it works. So this is a really, really cool feature. This is something that Pro Tools absolutely does not have. Third-party software in Pro Tools can do it. Logic does do it, but it's a little bit weird the way Logic works. To me, it's not very logical, actually, which is kind of funny. But Ableton Live, it's super, super straightforward. It's one of the things that attracted me to Ableton Live back in the beginning, in the first place, was because it was just so easy to use stuff in Live. And I had already been using Pro Tools for about, a few years when Live was released, and it just like really kind of got me how easy it was to use, and that's why I really started using it a lot. So that's the key map, the MIDI mapping over here. Right here is your CPU usage, and you can like pull down this window here. You can see like what the average is, what the current is, what's going on. Satori says, so when you assign a MIDI knob to a knob, does it store it permanently, or do I need to assign it every time I open Live? So it stores it with that session. So if you're working on a song and it stores it, but actually I don't really recommend doing a lot of mapping these days. And we're going to come back and talk about that. There's this thing down here called the blue hand. This blue hand here. And this, whenever you click on a different device, you can see the blue hand shows up on that device. And it happens with everything. And what that does is it automatically maps your knobs on your keyboard automatically map to the functions on here. It's actually super, super cool. And what I've been doing recently with Live 11, Live 11 updated how the macros work. And it's actually super, super cool. I'm going to show you that in a second, like when we get down to the plugins and stuff. But it's really, really cool. And basically every controller that you have that you can buy these days has an Ableton Live mode. It has like an Ableton Live mode. So anything you get, like I've got the Arturio in here, I've got stuff from Novation. They all have this Ableton Live mode. And when you put it in there, the knobs automatically map. So just out of the box, all I have to know is when I turn this on, I just hit Shift and I hit this pad over here on the right, and it puts it into Ableton Live mode. So straight out of the box without doing anything, the knob is automatically controlling the filter without me having to map anything. I don't have to do anything. I just have to know, just which one does what, and I can just grab it and do it. And it works really, really well. I can change the shape, you can change the amount here. I can change my frequency, resonance, and just without having to map anything. So honestly, most of the time, I don't actually map stuff anymore. It used to be that you had to map stuff. And just to go back to answer your question, nowadays, so to answer your question, the mapping is with the session. So if I have it saved into a song, it'll every time I open that song, it'll be the same mapping. And this is great for like on stage, like live stuff. Like when I'm doing stuff on stage live, I do map stuff out, just because it's just easier to lock it in for me. But if you make a new song, if you don't copy over that, if you don't like duplicate the other song, if you make a new song, you're gonna have to remap stuff. So cool. Where were we? Oh, over here. Yep, cool. So over here, we got this. So this is this is basically your CPU usage, how much of your computer processor you're using. This number is generally fine up until about 60%. At 60%, you're going to start getting dropouts and stuff like that. If you need to change stuff, you can go down here, click on the arrow, configure audio, and I'll just bring you over here to this. And this is where you can configure your audio setup. And here's your buffer size. If you're getting a lot of dropouts, I would crank this up to a higher number. I usually keep mine at 256 or 128. 256 is usually fine. It's like a nice balance for modern computers. It's a nice balance between being able to perform and being able to mix with a lot of plugins. So, and just so y'all know, I am using this on a MacBook Air M1 chip, the new Apple Silicon chip, and it works great. I haven't had any problems with Live not working. It's not officially supported. It does work in Rosetta mode, so it's not actually as powerful as it can be when they actually finally get it ported over to native. But it's like a, with this, when any kind of like this happened when Apple went to the Intel chips as well. What does it mean officially supported? It means that they say yes, it works, but it's not native. Native means it's running natively on the silicon without the computer doing any kind of translation. But the cool thing is that the Apple Rosetta translation, it's a software that Apple built into the operating system, and old programs can work on the M1 Macs really, really well, and it actually does a good job. I haven't run into any problems. The only plugin that I have that doesn't work right now is Massive X, which is unfortunate because I really like Massive X. But that's the only one that I've run into that actually doesn't work. I'm using all the Native Instruments stuff, all the Arturia stuff, like a bunch of, you're going to see it, Sound Toys and Fab Filter, all the things. And they all work really, really well. Sugar Bytes, the really cool companies. And it all works really well. The only one, seriously, and even Native Instruments has this on their site, like Massive X doesn't work on the M1 chips. So I don't know why that is. It's really weird. And it's also weird because it's like supposed to be one of their flagship products, and it doesn't work. But whatever, it's fine. It's just one plugin, but everything else pretty much works. So my advice is, if you are interested in getting into a MacBook, like an M1 Mac, because they're cheap for the amount of power that you get. So yeah, the next upgrade of Ableton Live will settle any kind of issues of anything. Yeah, really. I mean, what they've been showing, especially with video software, because video software is the most processor intensive, and then next is audio software. And what they've found with like video software, that they've made it natively, like it's made to run on the M1 chips, designed for the M1 chips, is it runs a lot faster. So these computers are super, super powerful, but you're going to, it's like funny because you're not going to get all the power that you could get out of it. Once they get these programs ported over, which will take probably a year or so, they're going to be smoking fast. But right now, I'm coming from my other computer is a Mac Mini i7 chip with 32 gigs of RAM, and honestly, this one does just as well, or if not better, for like a cheaper. So it's pretty cool. I highly recommend these computers. I do have 16 gigs of RAM. Mine is the 16 gig RAM configuration. So I did spend some more money. It was like $1,500. But the amazing thing is that had I got the same kind of power computer like a year previously, I would have spent like $3,500 or $3,000 or something like that. So the price difference is huge. All right. So over here, these things, hold on a second. These things right up here in the corner, if I hit a key on my keyboard, you're going to see these notes, these things flash. If I turn a knob, you're going to see other things flash. These are basically just to show you that you're getting data from your keyboard. It's for troubleshooting. So if I have my keyboard plugged in and I'm hitting keys on my keyboard and I'm not seeing this flash right here, then that means Ableton Live is not seeing that I'm hitting keys on my keyboard. It's just a little thing to troubleshoot stuff. So if I'm not hearing any sound, I can say, okay, what is the keyboard communicating with Ableton Live? And if I click this and I see it's happening here, then I say, okay, yes, the keyboard is communicating with Ableton Live. So my problem is not with communication. My problem is somewhere else. Why am I not hearing my sounds? And as a producer, a lot of what you're going to be doing is troubleshooting. Things happen. And so, especially if you're moving studios, if you're moving things around quite a bit, things are just going to happen. So it's always good to know how to troubleshoot so you can find the root of the problem quickly. And that's what this kind of helps us do. So that's that right there. Over here is our, we can switch the views like I showed you before. If we go down the side of the screen, down here is just going to show us different things. So you can click on these buttons to show or hide different things on your screen. Also, if you're on a Mac, it's Command Option, and the first letter that you see here is the shortcut for all these. So for example, if I want to hide my return tracks, Command Option R hides my return tracks. If I want to hide my I/O, I can Command Option I for I/O. That hides that stuff there. So it's really good when you're working, if you're trying to work fast, like sometimes I'm doing stuff and I just want to hide this I/O. I just do that. I want to hide my mix for whatever reason. I can do that. It's just useful to be able to show and hide things, especially if you're working off of a laptop with a smaller screen. And you can click on these buttons over here to do that, or you can actually just Command Option and that first letter there. And that's a really cool little shortcut for that. What is this? Oh, okay. So this little C thing is a new thing for Live 11. So if you're used to using an older version of Live 9, Live 10, whatever, this here shows you what track is taking up the most CPU power. So these things will like glow. They'll turn yellow, and the more bars are lit up, that's the more processors your software is taking up. So that way you can see which track is like a potential problem, or which track you might want to freeze and flatten to turn it into audio or something like that later on. It's a cool little feature. I often forget that it's there just because I'm just not used to it, and you can hide it. Does it? Well, no, it won't let me do it. That's not a shortcut there. But you can hide it if you don't want to see it. I just keep it on because whatever. But yeah, it's cool, I guess. I don't know. I don't really use it. So down here is where our instruments and effects can go for each track. So this is like all your plugins on here. On Pro Tools and Logic, they kind of stack up in like a grid. Like it looks kind of like this actually, and you put your plugins in here. Well, this is not what happens in Ableton Live. In Ableton Live, this is for your clips, for playing stuff, recording stuff like that. Your plugins go across the bottom down here, and the signal flow goes from left to right. So it starts over here, hits this plugin, this plugin, this plugin, this plugin, like this. So the way this works, I can just click on these and hit delete, and I can delete them. So let's say, for example, that I want to make a drum beat. I can go in here, and here's my drums. These are different drum kits, and I can just go in here, and I can click on it, and I can just I've got two things I can do to put these plugins on here. I can drag it onto the track and let go, and it will automatically put it down in the bottom of the track. I can also drag it straight down to the bottom, which will do the same thing. Or I can double click the plugin and it will put it onto the track. And if I don't have any tracks selected, it'll actually make a new track. Well, it's not doing it right now, but if I've got some stuff recorded in and everything and I'm like moving fast, I can actually have it so it'll create a new track for me is by double clicking it. So it's pretty cool the way you can do this stuff. And if I want to add more effects onto here, what I can do is I can say, okay, I want to add a compressor. So I can go over here, grab my compressor. The effects are right over here. We're going to talk about this in just a second. But I've got my effects here. Here's my EQ8. I can just drag this down here, and I can just put that there. Or I could put like let's put a filter on here. I can just drag it onto the track. If I just drag it onto the track like this and let go, it'll automatically put it at the end of my signal chain. So you can see the signal chain is going more and more further this way. And it works just like with anything else. There's no big secret to this. It's not different. It's you hit the effects and it changes the sound. So what I've got here is I've got a drum kit on here. Here, let me put this on my lap so I can get to it a little bit easier. So I got this here. And it's just playing different drum hits in here. We're going to talk about this. This is called a drum rack. We're going to talk about this in detail. We've got a whole lesson like devoted to drum racks. So we're going to come back and talk about this in detail. But basically, I'm playing this. It's on a MIDI track. I just threw an instrument on here. I'm playing this thing now. There's a new feature in Ableton Live 11 where they kind of, it's called, I don't know what they call it actually. Let's see what they call it. Let's see. Macro variations. Okay, they call them macro variations. These macro variations are basically settings for your macro knobs here. These macro knobs can control multiple features inside of any of our plugins that we've got. So if I double click this, or if I open it up, this is using some like drum synthesizers. And if I turn these knobs, first of all, if I click on it, automatically, hey, what are you doing? Give me my blue hand. There we go. If I click on it, automatically these macro knobs map to the 8 knobs on my controller here. So I can just grab these and drag them around and move them, and I can play it. Here, let's go ahead and set up a little beat real quick. Here, let's quantize that. Cool. So I got this little beat, And I'll just go ahead and record on top of it. I'll record a hi-hat. Cool. All right. So you can hear I've turned up the gain and stuff like that. I can actually change the sound right here. By just changing these knobs here. All right, so I can go ahead and change the sound up. And that's just by using these macro knobs here, and these macro knobs can control multiple things in the different plugins. We're going to talk about how to set this up because I think this is a feature that's always been pretty cool. But now with the macro variations in Live 11, it's one of my favorite things to do is just go through, set these to certain knobs and parameters inside my plugins, and then go and change them. And then what I can do is I can play this and it'll change these knobs here. So it's like different presets right here in Ableton Live. And I can use this for any plugins, third-party plugins, native plugins, whatever. Right, so makes it really, really fun to use, really easy to save changes and make really quick, make adjustments to your sound. You do have to set this up, so it does take a while. I've been spending hours setting these things up over the past few weeks. I've gotten really into it, and I've just really, every time I get a new plugin or whatever, I just take some time and set it up over here, so it just maps out to things on my controller really, really easily. So that's what's going on with this. This is kind of a new feature for Live 11 here. And this can work with anything. I'm using it with drums right now, but you can do it with anything. You can see, for example, if I go in here and I go into, let's go into instruments. Let's grab the Diva, put that over here on this one. And with this, you can see I've actually got a couple things that pull up. Let's go ahead and is it right there? So if I hit play on this, I can go ahead and play something in. Now, as this plays, I've already got this set up here, so I can just go in here. I can set it up. And I can go ahead and change it and make sounds. It's just because I set up a couple things here like a long time ago. So it makes it really easy once you get it set up, and you can add different effects and stuff in here. It's actually a really, really cool feature. All right, moving. Oh, so the other thing about this though is that this view down here is not only where I can see my instruments and effects. If I double click on a clip, I can also see my clips and see like what I just played, and I can edit my MIDI notes and stuff like that down here. So you can see this is what I just played. Here's my drum beat over here, and I can see all my drum notes and stuff like that. So it's this bottom section kind of does a double thing. It does both things. You can see the your effects, and you can also see your clips in here. And if I have an audio clip in here, let's go ahead and see, here, let's go over to this one. Let's go to Beat Making Essentials. Here we go. And do some drums. How is that a drum? So I can throw that in here. I can see my audio waveform in here, so you can see that. And also this one here, if I'm looking at my audio or my MIDI and I want to see it bigger, I can just drag this up and I can see everything that's going on in here. Again, we're going to come back and talk about that in more detail here in a little bit. But that's what's going on down here. We're going to talk about all this stuff over here, not right now. But this view down here, now the way you can switch between these two views is I can click on down here in the bottom, there's like these two little tabs. I can click on one tab or the other tab, and it shows me, if I click on this tab over on the right, it shows me my effects, and if I click on the tab on the left, it shows me my clip. Now, with this here, the shortcut for that is Shift Tab, and so I would really learn that shortcut. It's a really important shortcut to use. It really sped up my workflow a lot once I got used to using this here. So Tab key is to switch between your main window, your session view, and your arrangement view, and then Shift Tab is to switch between what you're actually looking at here. You're looking at the clip or you're looking at the track, the plugins and stuff like that. So that's what we got going on there. Now over here, going up this side over here, this is our browser, and there's a lot going on with the browser nowadays. We can, first of all, the browser, you can show it or hide it. There's a little triangle thing up here, and you can open or close it. You can also hit Command Option B for browser, and that'll show or hide the browser. I turn the browser, I show the browser, I hide it and show it like a lot when I'm working. But first of all, let's not start with the collections here. Let's start with the categories down here. The categories are for your plugins organized by categories. So is it a sound? Is it a brass sound? Is it an experimental sound? Is it a guitar sound? Is it a pad sound? And this is all stuff that comes with Ableton Live. So if you don't have any kind of instruments or sounds or whatever at all, Ableton Live comes with a bunch of stuff. You just have to install it. So that's all this right here. The next one down is drums, and these are all your different drum kits. And you can see there's a lot of different drum kits. And the way this works is if you want to just like audition these, you can turn on the little headphone down here. When you click on it, it gives you a little preview of what that's going to sound like, and you can say, okay, cool, I like that, you know. Oh, here, let's go back to this. Where was it? This one here. And I can just drag this over. It makes a new clip, and then I can play. Where are we? Oh, too far down. Hey, Bike Street Boy, what's up? Thanks, man. I'm glad you're liking it. I don't know. It's maybe your monitor's like a different setting from my broadcast. I can see all the stuff. Oh, I see what you're saying. Here, let me move that over then. I see. Like that. That's probably better. There you go. Yeah, cool. Hope that helps. So in here, so I can just grab a drum kit and drag it down. This is all your drum kits that come with Ableton Live. Obviously, if you're using battery or you're using machine or something else for the drum kits, then it's gonna access it in a different way. But this is a really cool, you know, I want to grab the sound here. So this is actually a really cool way to do that. So easy way to just grab drums and throw them in. Next over here we have instruments. Now the instruments and the sounds are very similar. The difference is with the instruments, this is gonna be your specific, like I want to use specifically this instrument that comes with Ableton Live. And you can say I've got Live Suite. And so over here you can see all the different instruments that I've got. So for example, if I wanted to, here, let me put a different synth sound in here. I can put the analog, and I can grab it and I can drag it down, and this is my analog synthesizer. If I click on this little arrow key here, yeah, this will be uploaded to YouTube. If I click on this here, it'll pull down different presets using this specific analog synth. So I can, if I know specifically that I want to use a certain synthesizer, operator, analog, something like that, I can do it from instruments. But if I'm just saying like, oh, I want to use a bass sound, or I want to use a string sound, I would go to my sounds. And that's the difference between the sounds and the instruments. The instruments are specific to the plugins, whereas sounds are like the bass sound might use operator, or it might use analog or something like that. So that's the real difference here. If you're not sure, if you're just starting off with this stuff and you're not sure what the different instruments do, then I would just go to sounds and just grab, like, I want a bass sound, and you can just pull a bass sound in here like this, and you can just actually click on it and it will give you like a note. Most of them will. Some of them, yeah. Some of them aren't set up, I guess. But you can hear, I can hear a little sound. Okay, I like that one, so I just drag it in, and now I've got that sound to kind of mess around with here. I can. And it just pulls it up. And that's just like, these are just bass sounds, right? So it's just, you don't know which one it's going to come from. It's just going to pull up one of them to use whatever instrument. So that's the difference there. Next, we've got audio effects. And the audio effects are just effects. They're not instruments. They don't make sound. They just change the sound. So this is where all your audio effects are. And these are the ones that come with Ableton Live. They come with Ableton Live. Next down, we have MIDI effects. MIDI effects, if you have used Logic and you're pretty good with Logic, you probably know about MIDI effects. Ableton Live actually made MIDI effects back in version 5 or 6. They were the first ones to do it. It's really cool. It kind of changed the game, especially for performance stuff. Logic added their MIDI effects in later. But this is like, if I'm playing here, if I, let's go ahead and record something. I don't like this loop. Get out of here, boom bap. And I can go in here and I'll just play something. Cool, so let's grab that little bit there. At the end, here we go, like that. Cool. So I got this sound here, and if I want to put this like up an octave, there are ways I can do it down here, but I can also just throw in a pitch thing. I just double click it, it puts the pitch before my instrument, and in here I can just go in here and say, okay. So I could do that. I could put in like an arpeggiator to give it some, whatever. I'm not even, like, I'm just. Okay, so there's some really cool stuff you can do with this. I'm just showing you right now, just like, because it's just an overview of everything it can do. But there's some really, really cool things you can do with these, and you can stack them and put them all together, which is neat. It's really, really cool. So the MIDI effects are really, really useful. You have to use them for some things, but they're also just really cool tools for creativity, for other stuff. And we're going to talk about all that stuff a little bit later on in the week. So that's what's going on here with the MIDI effects. Then down here we've got this thing called Max for Live. And Max for Live is, if you have Live Suite, you get Max for Live with Live Suite. And what Max for Live is basically like Reactor inside of Ableton Live. And it's like, what I mean by that is, if you know Reactor from Native Instruments, basically Max, it's a program called Max DSP, and it allows you to make your own plugins. Basically, you can make your own instruments, you can make your own effects. Most people do not know how to make their own stuff because that's like a computer programmer type of stuff. Like, there's code and things involved with it. But the cool thing about it is that a lot of people have made some really cool plugins, and you can access those. Some of them you have to pay for, some of them are free. There's a lot of great free ones out there. And Ableton Live with the Suite version, which is more expensive, but I think worth it, it comes with just all these Max for Live things that you can use to control stuff. It really opens up what Ableton Live can do. So that's what your Max for Live does. If you don't have Live Suite, I think if you've got the demo, the 90-day demo, you're using Live Suite, so you have access to Max for Live. It is more expensive, so I would say I don't know if I would recommend getting used to it or not, because it's really cool. If you do use it, it's really, really neat. But if you don't have Max for Live, it's going to be very frustrating. If you're not going to buy the Live Suite, I can imagine it being very, very frustrating if it's suddenly taken away from you. So use that one with a little grain of salt. But there is a lot of cool stuff that you can download and install in here. Some really, really neat stuff. And we're going to talk about this on another day as well. We're going to dive deeper into it to show you all the cool stuff. Finally, down here is your plugins window here, and this is for third-party plugins. Now, if you are just installing Ableton Live and you have a bunch of plugins on your computer already because you've been using Pro Tools, you've been using Logic, you've been using FL Studio, and you open up Ableton Live and you click on this plugins folder here, it's probably going to be empty. The reason why it's going to be empty is because for some reason, I'm not sure why, the default setting of Ableton Live is the plugins folder does not point to anything. It's just not activated. So you're going to have to activate it. And the way you activate it is you go in here to your preferences, and you can go up to File, Live Preferences, or Command comma. Go in here, and in here, where it says Plugins, over here on the left, you have to turn these on. So you have to turn on Use Audio Units, turn that on. Use VST2s, turn that on. I do have my VST3s turned on. I don't use the VST3s so much yet. I think VST2 is a little bit more stable. Audio units, I have those as well, but I really don't use the audio units either. And if you're on a Windows machine, you don't have that option. So you definitely want to go in here to your preferences, go to plugins, and turn these on. And that way, if you're doing it for the first time and you have a lot of plugins, it's going to take a while to scan your folder and recognize all the plugins. So it might take a second, so be patient because it's going to think about it for a while. But once you do this, then you have access to all of your third-party plugins. So I've got all my third-party plugins in here, and as you can see, I've got a lot of third-party plugins. This is what happens when you've been making music for as long as I've been making music. And so you can have access to these. But if you turn on Ableton Live for the first time and you don't see this stuff, don't freak out. You can totally use your plugins that you bought. It's just you have to turn them on like I just showed you. So that's your third-party plugins. We're going to talk about the collections here in a second. We're going to come back and talk about it. But here, if you're using audio units on a Mac, they are set up by their company name. And then if you're using your VSTs, some of them have company name folders. A lot of them don't have company name folders. So you have to, be aware of that. So yeah, you get used to it. You'll see. Like once you start using it, you'll see. Down here we have clips. I don't really use the clips so much. This is like for just basic like MIDI clips, audio clips, stuff like that. These things here are the clips. If I double click, I can see my MIDI notes in here. I actually don't really use the clips that much. I never got into the habit of using the clips. I keep my sets organized in a different way. I keep all my audio libraries organized differently, so I never got into the habit of using clips. So I can't really recommend how to use the clips. I've never seen people really use these clips like this. And same thing with samples. If you hit Command F or Control F on a Windows machine, you can type in search 808 kit, and that will pull up anything that's labeled 808 kit in my in my library of stuff. I don't really use this, especially for samples and stuff. You can see there's nothing called 808 kit. There's some 808 kit clips, but it just pulls stuff up. So it's a kind of a cool way if I know I'm like if I want to see like 808, what are all my 808 samples? I can do it in here. That's really the only time I use it, is when I'm doing a search for specific samples or something. Honestly, though, I will also just hit 808, and I'll go over here to my drums, and then any kind of drum kit, all this stuff will be 808s as well. So I can just go through, because my drums are set up by drum category, which I tend to use more than just the samples. I use this occasionally. I don't use it that much. But that doesn't mean that you can't use it like this. Everybody uses it slightly differently, and I'm not going to tell you you're right or wrong. I'm just going to tell you what I do. We also have grooves over here. The grooves are, this one is a new thing for Live 11. It used to be the grooves were in a different place, and I actually don't love the way they've got the grooves set up in Live 11 compared to Live 10. I actually preferred it in Live 10. But any kind of groove, and a groove is like to kind of like quantize stuff in a more musical fashion, so it like gives it like a feel that's not just straight robot 16th notes or 8th notes or something like that. So the groove here, let me go ahead and here. So for example, right now it's just a straight whatever. If I want to take a groove, I can put a groove on here. Let's go and go down to MPC. There we go. We're going to get one of these 16s. I double click it, and it puts it into the clip I've selected, whatever I've double clicked. And I can put it down here, and now you can hear it changes that kind of feel. And I can put another one down here, and it opens, when you double click it, it opens up this like groove pool, which is these little wavy lines down here, like a pool. And it can change my swing, and I can put more in here, and I can switch between my different grooves down here in the clip. You can hear how much that one's like different, how off it is. Okay, and if I want more of a groove or less of a groove or whatever, I can just like put it down here and then switch to it down here. Yeah, that one's pretty cool. So I can delete these other ones out of here if I want, you know. So that's what the grooves do. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. There are ways that you can make your own grooves, which is pretty cool. It's something that some people do. I do it occasionally. I think it's like a little bit better if you're working with a lot of live instrumentalists and they've got like a nice groove that you want to kind of copy for your quantized tracks. The groove is great for making your own grooves, but otherwise I don't really use it too much. And then finally down here we've got templates, and you can make your own templates for different stuff. So I've got like a template for my house starter. So if I double click this template, I'm not going to save this. If I double click my template, it'll come up and it'll be like, here's my like kits that I use for house music and stuff like that. You can also set up a default kit in here that's like for like whenever live just starts up here. And okay, this one didn't. Where did you go? Huh. Oh, okay, this 808 is not loading up properly. Hold on, let me just load up. Oh, I'm not gonna do this right now. Every time it loads up, it wants to find that file because I changed my hard drive on it. But this will show up, you know, with stuff, and if I hit play, you know, it's just for like house music, techno music, whatever. Some of these samples are offline because it's looking for them in a different location. But I can go in here, I can say, all right, let me double click this one here, and it will load up this other template. And the cool thing about this is that if you load it up from a template, when you go to save it, you can see it's still called untitled here. It's actually making a clean session, and it won't let me overwrite this template unless I force it to overwrite the template. So it's a cool way to kind of just like, okay, I use these sounds all the time for this or whatever. You can hear this one's like a slightly different setup here. We're missing the hi-hats because it's looking for it in the wrong place. But essentially, it's just an easy way to quickly get things up and running. I recently changed my hard drive over, and I haven't like shifted all my files. Everything's shifted over, but I haven't like told Ableton Live to look in these new locations for everything. So some of these are kind of like old news. So that's what your templates are for. It's pretty cool. I mean, it comes with a couple, I think, default ones, not like Pro Tools or Logic. I think Logic, I don't know how many Logic comes with, but Pro Tools comes with a lot of like templates, and this isn't like that. It's not going to come with a lot of templates, but I think you can probably download templates online if you wanted to check things out. Finally, down here we've got, well, not finally, almost finally, we've got places, and the places is where you can point to different like hard drives and different locations for samples and stuff on your computer. So you can see down here I've got lots of different stuff, and I can like say, okay, I want to go to my Sample Magic libraries, and I can go in here. I can go to my Sample Phonics libraries, and I can go in here. These are all like sample libraries that I've got. These are for me, the Sample Phonics is like a subscription that I pay for monthly. So I get a whole bunch of loops from them, and I can check stuff out. And then there's the Vengeance sounds, and I've got like folders for different music that I work on and stuff like that. Some Slate stuff. It's really cool, and it's an easy way to keep things organized. It's just right over here. So I highly recommend setting up your places. We're going to talk about how to do that. It's actually very easy, but we're going to talk about how to do that. And you can put all sorts of stuff over here. And I've got a favorites folder for my plugins that I can use down here, and I keep this plugin folder actually on Dropbox. So whenever I make a new preset or a new setting for a plugin, I just have it so it automatically just uploads to Dropbox. So if I go to somebody else's studio and we've got some of the same plugins, but they don't have my presets for those plugins, I can actually just access them from Dropbox and use them in their Ableton Live as well. It's a pretty cool way to work. It just kind of updates things in the background to the cloud, and I've got access to it everywhere in the world. Also, if my computer crashes, I'm not losing all my plugins and my presets that I've made over the years. Now, that brings me finally to these collections up here. And we kind of skipped the collections here in the beginning, but I'm going to, right now, like what the collections are, is Ableton Live favorites, or like a way that you can like organize your plugins different from how Ableton Live just has them like organized by default down here. So if I'm always using certain instruments, I can put those in here. You can see I've got them organized by different types of stuff. And I actually named these like this. When you first pull them up, they're not named like this. I named them like this. And so I've got instruments here. I've got drums, different drum sounds, different drum hits, different drum loops. And you can put anything in here that you want. You can put audio loops in here. You can put presets in here, all the stuff. I got different groups of things in here. The one problem with this is that if your computer crashes, and your computer will probably crash at some point, your hard drive will crash. If that happens, these just go away. These just like totally disappear. You can't get them back because this one doesn't, it's like in a very specific place on your computer. I don't know how to change it. There might be a way to change where the location is to put it into like a Dropbox folder or something. But I had these all set up at one point in time, and then my computer crashed. And then I was like, oh, I have to do those over. Now, fortunately, I also keep everything in this Ableton plugins folder. I've always done this because it used to be this is the way you had to do your favorites. So once I did, I was like, oh, I have to go back and reorganize these. And it actually took me a while because I was being so lazy about it. And I was just like a sad panda for a while. But yeah. So that's what these collections are. These collections are really cool. And if you can just like drag and drop, plugins and stuff into these collections here, so you can access them really easily. So I highly recommend putting stuff in here into these collections folders here. Really, really cool, really useful stuff. All right, let's go into here real quick. We're almost done. Over here's your I/O section. We'll talk about that more when we're talking about like routing audio. Here's your sends down here. Here's your faders here. Your track on off is these buttons down here across the bottom. And then if we go over here to our arrangement view, all the same stuff is here. It's just over here on the right-hand side. In Logic and Pro Tools, it's on the left-hand side. In Ableton Live, it's on the right-hand side, which actually, from a logical standpoint, makes more sense. But if you're used to Logic and Pro Tools, it's going to be weird to get used to. It's all over here on the right-hand side. I've got my volume level right here for the track level. I got the pan left and right here. I've got solo. I've got my mute button here. And in, out through, like for track routing, stuff like that. So it's all right over here on this side, and it's all right over here in the bottom down here. They are the same thing. So for example, if I move my pan on this one over here all the way to the right, if I go over here, it's now all the way to the right. And if I move this all the way over to the left, and if I go back to my other view, it's now all the way over to the left. So these views are controlling the same thing, just like your mix and edit windows in Pro Tools and Logic. The confusing part is when you're actually having different audio material or different MIDI clips on each one, which we're going to come back. We need to take a break here. We're going to come back and talk about that in a second. And then over here on the right hand side, I've got my return tracks, and this is for, I got this here, and I can put up some like room sounds in here, stuff like that. I can put up some delay. Right, so I've got some stuff set up over here. You can have a bunch of return tracks, and this is for your send effects, for reverbs and delays and stuff like that. You can have a bunch of return tracks set up in Ableton Live. So it's not just two. Two is the default, but you can have a lot more that are set up. And then over here, I've got my master fader. Oh, the return tracks are super, super important. Yeah, and we'll be talking about that later on in the week. But they're super, super important. So it's a really good idea, Satori, to learn how to use them. And it's actually not that hard once you put your head around it. It's like, oh, okay, cool, now I got it. But it is weird in the beginning, especially if you're not coming from like a music engineering background. Okay, then we have the master track over here, which is pretty cool. And we're going to talk about all this stuff once we talk about recording MIDI and things like that. And then you got your output here. Usually this is going to be set to 1 and 2. If you are DJing with Ableton Live, which some people do, then you can use the Q out to set up a different output for your headphones. Otherwise, this like here will do your metronome. So if I turn on my metronome, here, let me stop this here. So here's my metronome. I can turn the metronome level up and down right here. I can make that louder or softer. So you can adjust the metronome level so you're comfortable. And that's a really important thing to know about right over here, because I usually don't like my metronome to be super, super loud. Cool. That's it for the overview, broad strokes overview. What we're going to do is we are going to take a break here. Let me just go ahead and stop the recording. Whoa. Okay. Interesting. Hold on a second. Let me move this. My screen suddenly was not